Welcome, everyone, to the Spoken Wheel podcast. This is episode number 3. My name is Chris Valadez. I'm from a group here in Brookfield called Cycle Brookfield. And with me, as always, is...
I'm Peter Janice. I'm the owner of Gears to You in Riverside, Illinois. I just want to tell you I'm really excited about this because my good friend Tony is with us today. And if you like riding long distances and by yourself, today is the day.
Yes, it is.
So we're going to talk to Tony about randonneuring. So I just have a first question for you, Tony, is how do you spell randonneuring?
I think I mess this up every time I Google it. R-O-N-D.
Tony and Chris and I had so many problems.
T-Z-A-W-K.
I'm like,
It's up there with derailleur. It's one of those weird words.
So talk to us about randonneuring. What exactly is it?
It's basically like an excursion or a roaming. It was started kind of people just heading off into the mountains and on passes and things like that. Just kind of seeing how far they could go. Fully self-supported, so they're taking food, water, and on any sort of road conditions. So, this started back in the 1800s, the late 1800s. So,
Tony, you've been riding that long? Wow. Yeah, it's impressive.
So it was just kind of like a wandering. And so then they created an event called Paris-Brest-Paris. And 1891, I believe, is the first Paris-Brest-Paris, which is a 1,200 kilometer brevet, as the rides themselves are called. And originally it was a race, and it was supposed to be held every 10 years, and then they brought it down to every 4 years. And then it stopped becoming a race in 1951, but it does still continue as the oldest standing bike event, I think, in the world at this point.
That's amazing. Tony, I don't know a lot about randonneuring or brevet. I mean, you're saying words here. Maybe if you help us understand a little bit more about what does brevet mean? I mean, I've talked to you before. I mean, we've ridden before, and you've said these words. But I mean, for this everyday cyclist that we're aiming for, maybe tell us a little bit more about what does brevet actually mean.
Okay, so the brevet is the name of the actual event, which would be considered like the race or the ride.
Okay.
It's an organized event with certain checkpoints, and they vary from 200 kilometers on up to well beyond 1,200 kilometers. The kind of standard distances are 200, 300, 400, 600, which you use to then qualify to go into 1,000 plus K events. And they have controlled checkpoints where it used to be you would have to get off of your bike. You would have your little brevet card signed at the control point to make sure you weren't jumping on a train or jumping in someone's car, which happened all the time, apparently. And so
apparently, you've never jumped in a car.
I've
right?
never, no, never jumped in a car.
Sure, we'll believe you here. Yeah.
And so you used to have to stop at control points. And when I got into randonneuring in, I guess it was 2018, maybe, when I actually really started to get into it. They were still doing that, but you got receipts at gas stations.
Oh.
So you'd go in. It would be a place where you would typically stop and get water and food. And then during COVID, they actually switched it over to now they do, they should just check your GPS. So they'll just make sure that you did the entire course based on your GPS. You submit your GPS record of the ride, and they give you credit for it. So you no longer necessarily have to stop. Often you do have to stop, but sometimes you can ride, especially some of the shorter rides, without stopping.
And it's consistent. It's kind of a slow and steady, consistent ride, right? I mean, you and I did one a few years ago.
Yeah.
It was a 200 kilometers, so 120 miles. And you try to go in and try to be as consistent, or try to keep the ride consistent when you stop for these times. You just get your ticket chart, but you're only there for a few minutes. Until we got to about mile 90.
Ideally.
And then we the stop was at McDonald's, and we were there for like 45 minutes because people wanted chicken McNuggets and all sorts of different things. But I know you've gotten much better at it. We were talking yesterday about how you were out on a ride a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, I guess. And you got your time down to like 4 minutes.
Yeah, during COVID, I really went all in on the self-supported. I realized, especially doing a lot of the brevets where you do stop, it was, I'm awful at getting off my bike. I waste so much time when I'm off the bike, just messing around in the convenience store. What do I buy? Taking gloves off and on. And so during COVID, I didn't want to go in anywhere because I didn't want to be around people. So I packed everything, including my water and everything, and would just do. I mean, I could go up to like a 200-kilometer ride and without anything, and it depends on the temperature. Obviously, if it's hotter, then you have to carry more. You have to stop. But yeah, my best ride was actually in 2022. It was 100 miles with 4 minutes of stop time. Which was
Wow.
awesome, and
Wow.
that's because I came across a train, and so I decided while I was waiting for the train to go to the bathroom real quick on the side of the road, and then go. And so the whole stop time was 4 minutes because it was like a Sunday with you're out in the country, so there's very few stop signs, stop lights, stuff like that. Traffic.
And in being all self-sufficient now, it's a little different because people have electric gearing. I know you have electric gears and then the hydraulic brakes, but a lot of guys will carry their own chains with them. Will carry brake cables, everything. So it's completely self-sufficient. So it's a little different than like the traditional bike racing where you got a van following you or whatever. So
yeah, when I got into it, I was super into like the aesthetic approach of it. I built up a classic French randonneuring bike, so it had like nice chrome fenders. It had the big old handlebar bag, leather saddle. It was very kind of classic, and I quickly realized that that wasn't necessarily the best bike for me. I still love it aesthetically, but I did at the time, because it was all old school components. So I carried extra brake cables, all sorts of extra stuff, which now I've come to kind of throw caution to the wind a little bit more and not worry so much about that stuff. But
Ooh,
I mean,
risky. Okay.
but now that's up to 600-kilometer ride that I feel pretty comfortable doing that. I have yet to do a 1,200-kilometer. And so, maybe if it comes down to that, I will take things, because when you put everything into like that one ride, it would really, really be awful to have to bail on that ride because your brake cable broke and you have nothing to fix it with.
so talk about training. Like how do you train for something? I mean, I've ridden a couple 100 kilometers before, even, but how do you train for something that's 1,200 kilometers long?
I mean, the beauty of this series is that it kind of builds on each other. So the training is actually much less intense than if you're racing. So you can do a couple of 1-hour rides throughout the week, 2 to 3 maybe, and then do a long ride on the weekend. And then you just start to build your distance. So typically I'll start off, coming out of the basement when the weather breaks and start doing like 65, 70-mile rides. And you just kind of start building from there up to your century, and then the first event, which is a 200K, which is typically early in the season. The way they're spaced out is it really allows you to kind of hit your stride at the 200 and then taper down a bit and then build back up for the 300. So you're actually using each brevet to progress to the next distance brevet, which is pretty awesome. It's kind of very efficient way of training. And I think a lot of people do it that don't have the time to dedicate to doing something all the time, really intense. And so you can kind of ease into it. And your pace is much slower too. So it's...
Yeah, so I have a question about pace, Tony. Like, what kind of pace are you, setting at these? I mean, I always feel like when I'm riding either solo or if I'm preparing for a race, I'm trying to go as hard and fast as I possibly can. But I can't imagine that translates directly into randonneuring, because with those distances there, you have to really manage your pace and your efforts. I would at least envision. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, but you tell me what's your pace that you kind of aim for?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm super, super conservative because once you kind of push yourself over the limit, especially when you're way out there, it's really hard to recover. And so, yeah, I typically anywhere from 16 to 18 miles an hour.
Oh,
I mean, there are guys that go much faster for those distances. I mean, it's incredible what people can do. But yeah, I tend to ride fairly conservatively, and often when I'm done riding, and occasionally on an event, you will end up pairing up with someone and you'll ride together for a bit. But I find that always throws my rhythm off, and so it kind of throws my pacing off. I like to just be in my own head when I'm doing that. But often when I do finish with people, they always say that I look really fresh at the end, which I kind of think is a compliment because I'm like, I don't want to be.
That's a compliment.
Oh, I
don't
got a
want-
story for you.
I don't want to be completely wiped out. But that said, I think, there's definitely more that if I wanted to go quicker, I could probably put a little more into it. But it's not really about that for me. It's more about just spending the time out on the roads, checking things out, exploring new areas, having the confidence, that you can take care of whatever arises, whether it's a weather condition, a mechanical or any of that stuff. So a lot of people have a lot of different reasons for doing this type of riding, for sure.
So maybe Tony, help me understand what motivates you to do randonneuring. I mean, it sounds intriguing to me, and I know I've done a number of long distance rides, but randonneuring has a different ring to it. So maybe I don't know. I would love to say that I can do that, but sort of talking about like mental health space and getting out there to do a solo ride. Are you doing this primarily solo, or are you doing these with like groups? Is it maybe what's the aspect? What's the motivation that keeps you out there from a randonneuring perspective?
Yeah, I'm doing it pretty much solo, even if I leave with a group. And usually on these events, like there might be 7 people that are riding these. So it's not like a huge group of people. I kind of find my own pace. And if somebody wants to keep up or hang out or go ahead, I just kind of let them go. But I typically like to just keep my own pace. I think it took me a really long time to find my way to randonneuring. It goes back to like my interest in cycling at the beginning. It was just before I turned 16, and I was active in other sports, but Greg LeMond was like winning the Tour de France. I saw him on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and it was, I saw all the flashy spandex and Oakleys, and I was like...
The Oakleys, yeah, the mid-'80s Oakleys were really cool, weren't
I was
they?
like, this is a crazy, obscure, like, Euro sport that I've got to get into. And so for my 16th birthday, I asked my mom for a road bike. And I would fit it into my schedule as a release from everything else I did that was very structured, whether it was training for soccer or martial arts. And so I would just pack a backpack and go on these long rides. And then I would have my mom drive the long routes that I did in her car to figure out our mileage because I didn't have a computer. And so I just found that I really enjoyed just exploring back roads on my own, self-contained, and just kind of rolling wherever I felt. So through a roller coaster of other, years not riding, years racing, and that type of thing, I found this thing called randonneuring, and I realized it. Okay, in between there, I also got into backpacking and long distance kind of like trekking, and I found that I really liked the solitude that brought me. Of course, moving back to Chicago, where you don't have mountains and things like that to explore and to get lost in, I kind of found the open road. And randonneuring, again, was like an obscure subsection of a relatively already obscure sport, at least in America. And so that's kind of what led me to it. I'm also an only child, which kind of makes sense.
That fits. Yeah,
I was going to add that in, but
it seems like it seems like only child syndrome sort of stuff. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I'm going to ask a question because we chatted about this, but like, how did you link up with us here? I know you've been friends with Pete for a long time, and I've known you for a few years as well, Tony. But like, what's your story here in the local sort of cycling scene? How did you guys all like? What's the connection point here? I like this story, so maybe you can. I'm trying not to state it here because I really enjoyed this. So maybe I'll tell Pete to kick it off. Maybe so.
No, I think Tony could do a great job of talking about how Tony and I met through. Well, go ahead, Tony. You talk to it.
So yeah. So when we moved to Riverside, shortly after we moved to Riverside, my son was playing baseball. And my wife came home after one of my son's baseball games and said, I met this guy whose son is also playing on Augie's team at a baseball game. And we started talking, and, he said he rode bikes. And so my wife said, oh, my husband rides bikes.
Your wives are trying to set up play dates, it sounds like.
I think so. I think so.
Get my husband out of the house.
You're new to town.
Absolutely. And so then Pete's response to my wife saying my husband rides bikes was, well, does he ride bikes or does he ride bikes? And
we all know what that means, right?
Yeah. So, right, exactly. So my wife came home and told me that, and I said, I don't think I want to meet this guy.
And your standstill, you wish you didn't meet that guy,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
In hindsight,
In
yeah.
hindsight.
I couldn't believe it. And so at another baseball game, whatever, next week or whatever, we finally ended up meeting. And so Pete was riding with a local club and he's like, you should come out and join us. But I hadn't been riding for as consistently at the time. And so I was like, I don't think so. I think it took at least a year for you to get me to ride.
I think it was
Yeah.
a lot of invites, a lot of. I mean, we rode together. I think several times, just you and I.
Yeah.
But then getting you in to come in with a group ride, because it still goes back to that only child thing you have going.
The only challenge is the
Where you
randonneuring
just wanna
aspect.
ride
Right? You just
by
want to
yourself.
ride by yourself.
I mean,
and
I have
you
to
got to
give
work
you-
on your charm, Pete.
Yeah.
If you're trying to
Maybe
get
it's just
people to
me.
ride with you, yeah, that's can we do something better, man?
But so let's talk about nutrition too. Like, what do you eat? I mean, being out there for 400 kilometers or 300 kilometers is a long way. What do you eat while you're out there? I mean, when I'm there, my rides are much shorter than yours, but I'll have water and I'll have maybe a little packet of something or maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But what do you eat when you're out there for so long, and how do you pack it into a bag?
Yeah, I have a front handlebar bag and I just make a whole bunch of sandwiches. So peanut butter and jelly is a great one. I do waffles with cream cheese and jam, which is one of my favorites. Sometimes I'll throw a little meat and cheese pickle action in there. But I have a handlebar. I'll stack a whole bunch of sandwiches in there. And just kind of eat through them, eat them throughout the day.
Any cheesecake?
Yeah, right.
No cheesecake.
I'll tell you what. These episodes we're constantly talking about food, and I should really need to eat before.
We're all
I
going
walk
out
in.
to lunch.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, I really ride, I think, mostly to eat. When my riding is slacking, it gets really rough because I just want to eat. And honestly, one of the things is, and I've taught my kids this, is when you're out doing something, whether it's paddleboarding with my kids or when we're on a ride and you're like, oh, this is tough. This is further than I've ever gone. Like, just start thinking about what you're going to eat when you get home. And that's like one of my favorites. Come up with a game plan.
Game plan to eat when you're.
Love it.
I think that's when you start thinking about food while you're riding, is when you're kind of starting to bonk and you've lost all energy because you start concentrating on the food more than you just concentrating on the ride at that point. So let's talk about how, if someone wanted to get into randonneuring, am I saying it correctly?
Randonneuring.
Randonneuring.
Yeah. Are we saying it? Yeah.
I can't spell it or
good
say
to
it
me.
right.
I feel like we need to be a little bit more French in our
Yeah.
approach. Brevet,
This-
randonneuring. Yeah,
This sport that you like to do. Like, how does one get into it? How does one, is there clubs? Is there things to
Yeah, there
different
are
places to go?
There are clubs. I mean, I do a lot of this, especially the training on my own. Throughout the years, you figure out, like with any discipline with cycling, you kind of figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then how far you want to push it. So, even if you're racing, like how much do you want to push the racing? How much do you want to, randonneuring typically often is done in groups where it's more about the camaraderie. I like it for the solo, like the ultra endurance type thing, where you just kind of like get lost out there by yourself. And I found over the last couple of years that when and where in a season of training to push my my power and to build power for something like that, and then just tapering into it. Where in the season do you want to start the long rides, and start tapering off the power, because it's one or the other. After a season of doing long distance and building up to that like 600K, you got nothing. Like sprinting, there's nothing. There's nothing left. It's amazing how different they are.
So Tony, what's stopping you from a 1200K? What's
It just, I was all in on building everything, and then just a bunch of work, family, just kind of trying to find that balance right now. And so it's coming. It's coming for sure. I mean, Paris-Brest has always been kind of one of those things that it just happened last year. So in 4 years, and so it's kind of that's a goal, but honestly, even less than that, just a 1200K domestically. They do have some in Wisconsin. There's a cycle club, going back to your last question. There's a Great Lakes Randonneuring is a club that I belong to out of Wisconsin, I think, but they kind of encompass the whole area. So they put on a whole bunch of events that are really great, all through Illinois and Wisconsin. And so they do 1,200K every couple of years. It's one that sounds amazing in North Carolina. You still have to qualify, but it's, I think, a lot less. Like if I'm going to France, I would love to ride my bike, but I'd also love to just take my family and just hang out with them. So it's kind of one of those, like, if it works out, cool. If not, just building to that distance domestically would be
I'm
awesome.
sure they would just like to have you sit at the side of the road while you ride 1,200 miles.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like, sitting at the cafe,
Hold on,
right?
kids.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Cheese and wine. Oh, yeah. While
see you
Dad
in a
rides
day
his
and a
bike
half.
for be gone. So, how long does a 1,200K like? What's it? What is Paris-Brest Paris? Like, how long is someone actually out? Like how long would you be out on a 1,200K ride? Like, what does that look like? I mean, explain it to me in days or hours or something, if you don't mind.
People do it in all sorts of different ways. Some of those grand brevets, some of them will stop in a hotel at night, each night, and they'll plan their route. It's 90 hours. You have 90 hours to do.
To complete it?
To
Okay.
complete it. And so some people will stop or crash, one night and maybe, ride through the night. Because a lot of randonneuring is riding through the night.
Oh,
So you
wow.
have to have
Okay.
all lights. You have to have sometimes backups to lights. So that stuff I do.
So you have a backup battery then for the lights and
Yes.
computer.
Yeah, now. Or a generator hub.
Oh, you generator hub, really? Wow,
Generator
that is kind of old
circa
school. That's good.
1964.
Showing your age, both of you.
So yeah, I
I'm
mean,
kidding. Sort of.
it's people do it in a number of different ways. Other people will ride it straight through, and so the fastest time I believe was the last year it was raced was 38 hours.
Oh,
Like
wow.
just over 38 hours,
That's
which is
insanity.
incredibly fast for
Yeah.
doing 1,200 kilometers. But everybody has their own goal when it comes to that and how they're going to do it. Some people just do it for the party or the experience and riding with other people, riding with friends, and others just do it either as fast or as slow as they want to do it. It's it's kind of a really cool sport in that way because it's kind of like you design your own your own way to ride, and you can kind of have it work.
I think that's one of the unique things about it is you can go as fast or slow as you want and just set your own pace. Where if you're in a race, you're with 40, 50 other guys or girls, people, and have to go that speed. Where this, you can go as slow as you want. I did the 120 or the 120 mile, the 200K with you that one day, and I mean, there was guys that were with us for a few minutes and then they'd fall off or then they'd come back, and so it was very unique that way. It was very cool. So what else? What else do you have to tell us? What's the next thing?
What's the next thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping this year to complete the whole series again because it's an accomplishment and it's just feels awesome to be out there for that long and like just in your head, throughout the day, the roller coaster of kind of thoughts that come in through your head. I really enjoy it. I find it super meditative, and it's kind of like a very cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
You come back, it takes a couple days to come down.
Yeah.
I find, and to like kind
Feel
of
like you just fall asleep.
recalibrate to people. But I'm hoping this year to do at least 200 through 600. And then
Okay.
I've got a couple long rides that are kind of like on my list of things I'd like to achieve sooner rather than later. So
Tony, do you have like one specific bike that you use for randonneuring, or do you have multiple bikes? And I know we don't have your bike here today. We'll probably put some pictures, but you maybe help me understand. I know we all have different bikes for different things, and I would assume that randonneuring probably, you have to have your randonneuring bike versus your standard road bike or gravel bike, whatever. Do you have like one or how many? What's your randonneuring gear?
yeah, you can really ride whatever bike. I mean, apparently a lot of the people in Europe just ride on race bikes, race
Okay.
road bikes. And so, a lot of the courses, most of them, I believe, there are paved. We've done a handful where you might go off onto unpaved, sometimes dirt, or it might be you can take an option to do that.
Fun.
We have hit a lot of gravel roads. I've always been comfortable riding on gravel roads on my road bike. But some of those gravel roads that I have come across on training rides have become, way too thick and slushy for that, and so that becomes problematic. There was one 300K we were doing up in Wisconsin that came across a sand road.
Oh, sand, my nemesis.
awful.
Yeah, it sounds. I hate sand.
It was awful.
I sink really quickly. Just letting you all know. Yeah,
We
I
hit-
weigh a little bit. Yeah.
We hit that sand road in the middle of the night because I was messing around at all these control points, and I kept going the wrong direction because I didn't have a GPS computer.
Oh.
And we hit that sand road in the middle of the night, and it was snowing. It was
Oh,
it was
jeez.
awful.
You're really selling this. We're telling us.
I mean,
trying
it's
to get more
not
people involved in this, not less.
it's not for everyone.
It's we go for the chicken nuggets. Apparently, we already talked about it, right? So
right.
chicken nuggets and sandwiches that Tony's going to make for everyone, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, that's amazing. Well, Tony, I think this has been really enlightening, at least for me. And this is, I don't, I mean, I'd love to say I can get out and do some randonneuring. It sounds like it's a lot of fun. So it's new. It would be new to me to get out there and do it. Maybe I'll have to join you one day. You invited Pete. Maybe join. I can go slow for a long distance. I don't mind that. Pete knows how I ride. So
I do.
It's a very accepting group of people. Everybody is super friendly. They don't care what kind of bike you ride, from like, a beautiful handmade, classic randonneuring bike to I ride a Roubaix, a specialized Roubaix.
Oh, got it.
What you asked. So anyway, it's super accepting group of people.
That's great. Well, we'll get maybe we'll join you out there. And if anyone wants some more information, we'll do what we can. We'll post some links in our comment section here. So when you get to view this, we'll post how to follow Tony. A picture of his bike will be posted as well, so you can see what a randonneuring setup actually looks like. And we'll give you some information on how you get into randonneuring here in the Midwest. But this has been a lot of fun for me, Tony. Thanks so much for coming out.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for rolling on over here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, this is great. Well, thanks everyone for coming again to the Spoken Wheel podcast. We're always excited to have you. Hopefully we're bringing you amazing information. Please send us some comments, like, subscribe to our YouTube station, to Instagram. Again, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. We are very likely there for you. Watch us on YouTube, subscribe, send us some comments and information. We'd love to hear more about what excites you and gets you on
Just
a bike.
positive comments.
We'll take the negatives as well.
And of course, I'm Peter from Gears to You. If you want to follow me on Instagram, Tony also is a photographer, fantastic photographer, done pictures for me a lot.
Yeah.
So if you need anything from photography, from bikes, from Cycle Brookfield, follow all of us, and then go from there.
Yep. Send them some comments, and we'll see you again on our next podcast. So thanks everyone. Thanks for watching the Spoken Wheel.